How's it going, everybody? Chuck Holton here, and I am trying to make my microphone work. I'm in Jerusalem, and it is just about 6 o'clock at night. Sun's going down. It's a beautiful day. Let me see if this microphone works. Here, shalom. Come on. Shalom. Okay. Whoa, did you all hear that? Did y'all hear that explosion just then? I'm trying to see if this thing is working or not. There was just a pretty big explosion coming from the old city, the direction of the old city over there. And yeah, you heard that? Okay. Well, that's exciting. I'm not sure what happened, but if I start hearing a lot of sirens, maybe we'll go that direction and see what's going on. So, hello everybody. Glad you're here. And like I said, it's about 6 o'clock at night over here. Trying to get the microphone working correctly, but yeah, take cover. No, I don't think it was a missile. This is kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight. We have, that's the YMCA tower, by the way. And this is just not going. Okay. The YMCA tower is a pretty nice hotel, actually. We've been staying there for a few days, and it's pretty nice for an old hotel. Let's put it that way. Oh, I hear gunfire. I'm just listening. Hang on a second. Trying to see what's going on over there. I kind of feel like I should be running over there. We'll wait and see if it sounds like there's more going on. If we hear a whole bunch of sirens, we'll go that direction. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about tonight is just about where this war is going. Where does Israel think it's going? And how can we read between the lines? That's really what I try to do on these lives, is help you read between the lines as to what is happening and figure out what's going on. So to do that, we got to look at, we can look at what's coming out in the news, but we have to sort of parse that information, and we have to figure out what's not being said, okay? So, for example, I've been talking about the fact that the IDF and the Israeli government have been saying all along that they want to completely destroy ISIS and get their hostages back. And then at one point, Netanyahu was saying, and we're going to destroy the ideology behind Hamas. Well, I was saying all along, that's impossible. You're not going to destroy the ideology behind Hamas, because the ideology behind Hamas is radical Islamic terror. And there are perhaps 200 million people in the world who subscribe to a radical Islamic ideology. And so you're not going to get rid of that. But I then went on to say that you could probably eradicate Hamas or get your hostages back, but it would be very difficult to do both. And that's because in order to get the hostages back, really what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to settle with Hamas. They're going to have to come up with a deal for Hamas. And by doing so, they're going to allow Hamas to survive. That's going to be Hamas's red line, if they're going to, look for more hostages to be released, they're going to have to survive. And that's exactly what they have been saying. Hamas rejected the most recent proposal for a hostage negotiation out of Qatar because the IDF or Israel came to the table and said, we will release 700 Palestinians, including murderers and people that we said before we would never release, in exchange for 40 of the about 100 living hostages. I saw today an estimate there are 98 or 99 living hostages left. So that's already walking back what Israel said they would settle for. Israel said they were not going to release murderers and people who had been convicted of terrorism. And in this most recent proposal, that they were proposing to release 700 people, and some of them were murderers and people convicted of terrorism. So there you go. They're already backing it off. And I've been saying all along, they're going to have to redefine what winning looks like for the Israeli people, or the Israelis are going to lose, and the government is going to lose, and everybody's going to lose. Okay? Now, what we're seeing is that Hamas is saying, we are not going to accept any proposal that does not include a 100% permanent pullout from Gaza. Well, if Israel pulls out of Gaza right now, what you've got is Israel loses, because Hamas is still in control. There are still at least 4 brigades of Hamas fighters in Rafah that they know about. There were a total of 24 brigades at the beginning, and they have pretty much decimated 20 of the 24 brigades. But that doesn't mean they've killed all the people that were in those 20 brigades. They've destroyed their ability to make war for the most part. They have killed, they say, up to 13,000 fighters. Hamas says they admit to 6,000 fighters. It's funny, I think I told you yesterday, I went and talked to a merchant in the, in the old city of Jerusalem. And this guy was a Palestinian Arab, and he was livid that I thought that Israel had a good reason for going to war with the people of Gaza. He was livid. He was so mad. It took me an hour to get this guy to come down, Yeah, I said 99 left alive of the hostages. That's what I read today. Obviously we don't know exactly what the numbers are, but they said 99 left alive. Okay, so this guy that I was talking to in the old city, he said he did not believe Hamas's own numbers as to how many soldiers they've lost. He said it couldn't be more than 500 or 600 that had been killed. Now, and this is a very interesting window into what the Palestinians are being fed. So the Palestinians are being fed the lie that the Israelis have lost more troops in Gaza than the Palestinians have. One of the reasons why the Gaza Health Ministry does not break out the number of dead that are soldiers or fighters as opposed to civilians is because they don't want the numbers that are being given to the people in Gaza is that we haven't lost very many fighters at all. That apparently, and the Palestinians that live here in East Jerusalem, same thing. They are hearing, he actually took me in the back of his shop and turned the TV on to this little tiny cathode ray tube about this big, real scratchy television, and it was like, see, this is the truth. And I'm like, you just told me that the news is lying to everybody, but not your news, not the news that you're getting, apparently. But what they're hearing from their news is that Israel is losing badly in Gaza. Now, I don't know how they can hold those two thoughts in their mind simultaneously, that Israel is losing badly, but they've killed 30,000 Palestinians. Israel obviously hasn't lost 30,000 people. So there are any number of metrics you could use that would make it very clear that Israel is not losing, for sure. But again, what I learned talking to this guy for an hour and a half yesterday is that there's no use trying to reason with the Palestinians, because I was telling him, listen, he said, look, the Palestinians, the Hamas, when they attacked on October 7th, they did not kill any women and children. I said, dude, you're just wrong. I was there. I mean, I went there 2 days afterwards. There were still bodies laying around. I saw it with my own eyes. They took me around Be'eri and showed me where children had been murdered, where women had been raped and murdered. They showed me photographs of the bodies that they had already cleared out of there. I said, it happened. He said, no, couldn't be. He said, you didn't see that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. How are you telling me what I saw with my own eyes? You weren't there. But he just got so upset. I mean, I really thought this guy was about to start, like, you know, to go grab a knife or something. I mean, he was just livid to the point, like I said, where there were police and IDF soldiers that started sort of gathering around, and they kept their distance, but they were definitely keeping an eye on that guy, because he was just, ah! You know, just screaming, talking to me. It was crazy. And I finally thought, you know, what's the Christian thing to do here, to keep getting this guy spun up by arguing with him? Because it's obviously he's not interested in a discussion about this. He just wants to vent. And so I just let him vent. And I just sat there and went, oh, okay, interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm not here to change his mind. If he made it very clear right at the beginning that he was not interested in any kind of logic, any kind of facts. You know, Douglas Murray says this all the time when he gets into discussions with rational, reasonable people, where he said, look, you're welcome to your opinion, but you can't make up facts. And the facts are that Hamas broke down the fence on October 7th, came into Israel and murdered lots and lots of civilians. They murdered a little over 300 soldiers, but they murdered far more than that, almost 1,000 civilians. And they filmed it. They filmed it with their own cameras, okay? So the 43-minute video that they showed to the journalists and several other people, you can't watch that video and come up with another rational explanation of what happened. You can't watch that video and say, oh, they didn't actually kill any civilians, because they filmed themselves killing civilians. They filmed themselves gunning down elderly people in their homes. They filmed themselves stopping soccer moms with their kids in the back of the car on their way to taking their kids to, you know, soccer practice or whatever, and just machine gunning right through the windshield and killing the mother while the children watched in the back seat. They filmed it. And yes, it was demonic. But trying to make that case to a really spun up merchant who happens to be Palestinian Arab, not going to happen. He tried to convince me that Islam is a religion of peace. I just told him, brother, you save your breath, man. You're talking to somebody who's been watching, reporting on, and dealing with the aftermath of the religion of peace for more than 20 years in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Israel and lots of other countries around the globe, Nigeria, you name it. So you're not going to convince me that Islam is a religion of peace. It's more like a religion of pieces. But I understand that there are peaceful Muslims around the world, and I've got some of them who are friends of mine. And so I'm not saying that all Muslims are not peaceful. I'm just saying that Islam, as it's written, is not a peaceful religion. There's no like new covenant in Christianity. You could point to the Old Testament and say, wow, God was really brutal with some of those cultures, the Hittites and the Philistines and the Amorites and people like that. God was really brutal with those people. Well, yeah, they were burning their children alive. There's that. Okay, but yeah, God commanded those cultures to be wiped from the face of the earth, man, woman, and child. And so Joshua, when he took over the Holy Land, he went through all of those cultures and societies that were already here and literally wiped them out to a man, woman, and child. And that's pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. But we have a new covenant. And so Christianity is a different religion than that Old Testament religion was. We are not. We don't have a need to go through entire cultures and destroy them, man, woman, and child. We're in the business of loving the hell out of people, not killing the hell out of people, is what I'm getting at. But Islam doesn't have a new covenant. They're still under that very brutal old covenant. And so what I'm saying is that Muslims who are peaceful are in the eye of the extremist Sunni, Shia, Wahhabis, whatever, are bad Muslims. That's why those terror groups kill more Muslims than they do anybody else, because they belong to a death cult. And that's the way it is. Now, I want to get around to what I wanted to talk about today, and that is Israel has started up its training programs again. Now, they were training soldiers all along. I mean, from day one, they put a lot of their military training on hold because it was not time for training. It was time for war. And it was time for on-the-job training, right? So they put some of these IDF troops that came in through very rapid, very quick training to get them ready to go into combat. And they sent them into combat. Sent them out to the front lines. A lot of reservists and had already had some training, but they took them out to the range, got them up to speed, and sent them off to the war zone. But they were not, like, for example, with their Air Force, doing a lot of training with their Air Force, because their fighter pilots ostensibly are pretty well trained already, and now it was time to actually put your training into practice. But they are now starting up the training programs again for their Air Force. And in reading the articles about that, how they're starting to spin up their training cycles once again, the reasoning is that they are going to need more trained pilots. They're going to need more trained infantrymen, more trained tankers, et cetera, because they believe that they are going to have to go into Lebanon. And that is going to be a much bigger and more protracted fight. Now, today, right before I went live, I read something very interesting. I read an article that kind of, I don't know if it sat well with me. It was kind of obvious. And what it was talking about is that there are now officials, it didn't name the officials, but officials in the in the Israeli government who are starting to say, we may not be able to actually destroy Hamas. And the reasoning is because the United States has turned its back on us. If the United States continued to support us, we would be able to wipe out Hamas. But without the support of the U.S., we may not be able to accomplish our goal of destroying Hamas completely. I don't know if this is the Israelis' plan, what they're starting to go, yeah, we're not going to be able to sustain a long-term counterinsurgency effort in Gaza and in the West Bank. And the longer this goes on, the more time we are giving Iran to somehow successfully equip fighters, insurgents inside Judea and Samaria and the West Bank. Because what we've been seeing in the last few days is a lot of weaponry that Iran is trying to move into the West Bank. And we're talking about not pistols and rifles. There are those. But we're talking about big boxes of explosives, landmines, rocket-propelled grenades, anti-tank guided missiles, things like that, that if they get a bunch of that built up in the West Bank, then the West Bank will be the place where the next October 7th attack comes from. And I think what's happening is the Israelis are starting to look around and say, we could perhaps decimate Hamas and destroy Hamas in Gaza, but in so doing, we are going to be preparing, giving the people in the West Bank time to prepare the next attack on us. And so if we destroy Hamas, it's not really going to matter in the end, because the next October 7th attack, the next Al-Aqsa flood is not going to come from Gaza. It's going to come from the West Bank. If we go into, we very well are likely going to have to go into Lebanon, the IDF is saying, because there's no way that they can keep they can keep 80,000 people. They've more than $100 million already just paying for the people who are evacuated from the north and from the south out of their homes, just paying for them to live in hotels, to be out of work, to not be able to, have their businesses and that sort of thing. It's already cost the Israeli government $100 million. So they're looking at this and they're going, look, we're going to have to go into Lebanon because, let's see, go Gaza. Let's get rid of this guy. Remove. They're going to have to go into Lebanon because otherwise they're going to go broke. But it sounds to me like they're not expecting the next attack to come from Lebanon. And they're not expecting it to come from Gaza. They're expecting it to come from the West Bank. And just today, this morning, there was a attempted mass shooting on the road that I've driven many times that goes actually that we will have to drive in order to leave Israel next week. We're going to have to drive on this road that goes by Jericho. And this morning on that road, a guy ran out in the road with an automatic weapon and started shooting at cars going by, shot at a bus. 3 people were lightly wounded, one I guess, seriously wounded. Fortunately, the bus that they shot at was a bulletproof bus because that's, unfortunately, a very regular occurrence in that area. But they shot up several vehicles. They weren't able to catch the perpetrator, last I heard. They were looking for him still. And another article I read said that they had found a large amount of explosives, weapons, hand grenades, and things like that, and landmines in Jenin. And they had found some IEDs. Roadside bombs already planted that did not go off, and a car bomb that they found in Jenin, which is in the West Bank. So, I mean, we could be seeing the run-up to another big attack if that, I mean, so what's Israel going to do? Are they going to do to the West Bank what they did to Gaza? Gaza is much smaller than the West Bank. And there's a lot, there's, I don't know, 2.5, 3 million people in the West Bank. Are they going to go do there what they've done in Gaza? I don't think the world would stand for it. I mean, I hope Israel will do what it has to do to make its people safe. But it just sounds like they are starting to rethink what's possible. And the United States, for its part, has sort of backtracked a little bit on having thrown Israel under the bus the other day in that vote in the UN. They are, this is Lloyd Austin gave a speech today and said that, you know, we think that Israel does need to go into Rafah. They do need to go in there, and they do need to, you know, decimate the 4 remaining brigades of Hamas fighters. But we just think they need to do a phased approach. So they have a, you know, here, the United States has a plan for you, Israel. You need to do it like we would do it, which is a phased approach where you're going to go in phases, and that'll give the people time to move around and stay out of harm's way, et cetera, et cetera. Now, bear in mind, this is the same United States who so far has lost in Afghanistan, lost in Iraq, has pulled out of, you know, has sunk billions of dollars into Ukraine, and now is in the process of sort of pulling out of Ukraine and leaving Ukraine holding the bag so that Ukraine will end up losing. I mean, if that's the case, then why did we already spend so much money on them? In for a penny, in for a pound, I say. What I'm saying is the United States does not have a great track record of defeating insurgencies. But now we're trying to come give Israel some advice on how they can defeat an insurgency. Look, I'm telling you, I keep saying this over and over again, especially after talking to that guy yesterday. Israel doesn't need to try to negotiate with anybody, including the United States. What Israel needs to do is just get busy winning. And the only way they can win is by just saying, we will continue forward until our hostages are released. And once the hostages are released, then we'll talk. But until then, we don't need to talk. We just need to go. We just need to start, we just need to continue dismantling Gaza piece by piece, dismantling Hamas piece by piece until we get our hostages back. And if we don't get our hostages back, then Gaza is going to be razed to the ground, and they're going to have to start over. Oh, don't worry, Gaza. America will come to your aid. America will give you $100 billion probably to rebuild everything nice, new, and modern. But that's what Israel ought to do, most likely. That's what Israelis want Israel to do for the most part. Now, there's a small minority of Israelis who are against what Israel is doing right now in Gaza and say we should not fight at all. But I would venture to say, I would submit to you that those people don't matter in the greater scheme of things. They really don't. I mean, they're such a small minority, and what they're essentially saying is the country I live in, the people group I belong to, needs to cease to exist. And just like the people in America who say that about America, I think nobody should listen to those people, right? Yeah. Carla says, we better not build anything in Gaza. I guarantee you the United States will pay for a large portion of the rebuilding of Gaza. It's going to happen. The United States is already spending hundreds of millions of dollars, and has been for many, many years, but I mean, an additional hundreds of millions of dollars on sending aid to the people in Gaza, much of which is going to support Hamas, much of which is prolonging this war making it last that much longer, prolonging the misery and suffering of the people in Gaza. You understand, if nobody had provided any aid to Gaza, this thing would probably be over already. Go back and look at your history. If you look at what happened in World War II, everybody, this has been tried in World War II, the bombing campaign. They tried to be humane about it. They tried to be, careful about it. They tried to only bomb military targets and only, shoot down German planes and all that sort of thing. And took a very moral stand at the beginning. By the end, they were bombing everything in sight because Germany was not going to give up until they were hurt bad enough that they just begged to surrender. And that was the only thing that worked. Same with Japan. This is the only thing that worked with Japan, was to hurt them so badly that they begged to surrender unconditionally. No conditions, no negotiations. We didn't have negotiations on the ship in the harbor at Pearl Harbor when we accepted the surrender of the Japanese. There was no negotiations there. It was an unconditional surrender. We didn't negotiate with Saddam Hussein at the end of the first Gulf War. It was a surrender. You know, the United States, it's pretty rich that the U.S. is telling Israel that they've got to be more ethical about their practices, when Israel literally is the most ethical. They hold the highest standards of ethics of any military on planet Earth. Do you know that when the United States took over Ramadi, that we killed something like 10,000 civilians to take over a much smaller area than Gaza? Did you know that some people say we killed 100,000 civilians taking over Mosul, the much bigger city? The United States did during the war in Iraq. There were many times where the United States went in and it was just accepted collateral damage that we would kill tens of thousands of civilians in the process of rooting out the insurgents that were fighting against us. And now the United States is trying to say to Israel, you can't have any collateral damage, zero, none. And Israel is actually taking steps to minimize collateral damage to the extent that no fighting force on the planet has ever done. And the United States has the gall to criticize Israel and to go to Israel and say, let us show you how you should be doing this. Let us show you. Israel should be so absolutely offended by that they should tell the United States, when we want your opinion, we'll ask you for it. Other than that, we're not going to listen to anything you have to say. Now, I'm not saying that the IDF is perfect. I'm not saying that Israel is perfect. I'm not saying that Jews are perfect. I'm just saying that from what I've seen on the ground, from all of the available data, Israel is using the most humane method humanly possible to root out the terrorists that live in Gaza. That still means that some civilians are going to die. But that is war. War's not pretty. War is dirty. It's ugly. And I wish it never had to happen. But when 3,000 terrorists flood across your border and murder your civilians, war is going to have to happen. I asked that shopkeeper yesterday, what do you think Israel should have done after October 7th? And he said, well, Israel was responsible for most of the death on October 7th. And I was like, okay, all right, yeah, you're going to do that? You're going to go there? Okay, well, what if, let's just pretend then that the killing, or at least some of the killing, was done by Hamas. What should Israel have done? Oh, well, you know, it's okay if they, you know, try to take out a few of the Hamas leaders, but not what they're doing, you know, going in and wiping out all of Hamas. That's beyond the pale, he says. Well, I said, what would you do if it was your family? He said, I would never stop. I said, well, there you go. And he didn't see any contradiction there. That's the thing that I just don't get. Have you heard anything about buildup of Russian troops on the Syrian border? Only from people like you making comments in my live feeds. There is no significant buildup of Russian forces on the border with Syria. Okay? That's like blaming a battered woman for being battered. Yeah. Okay. You're right. The shopkeeper did not say the same if his family was on the line. He was saying, but the Israeli soldiers are rude to us when we get stopped at checkpoints coming out of our neighborhoods. I said, maybe you should try not blowing people up on a regular basis. Maybe you should try not running them over in the street on a regular basis. Maybe you should try not trying to stab the IDF on a regular basis. That happens almost weekly here. That explosion we heard at the beginning of the live could very well have been directed at some of the cops down there. There was a huge fight last night at the Jaffa Gate right here. And I'm not sure what started it, but it was a brawl. It was an all-out brawl between Jews and Muslims down there. I don't know what started, but the videos are out online. I'll put them up on my podcast. I'm sorry, over on my website, chuckholton.com. You can go over to chuckholton.com and you can find a lot of the articles that I read, that I talk about when I'm doing these lives. You can go to chuckholton.com and find out about my documentaries that I've put out about, you know, Russian atrocities in Ukraine, for example. I've got documentaries about the shipwreck of Paul in Malta. Did a documentary about a guy who went and actually found the anchors from Paul's shipwreck. You can get information on some of my books. I've got 10 books in print, so you can go find that all over at chuckholton.com. Also, you can go to the Hot Zone with Chuck Holton here on YouTube, and you can follow me over there, and I'll do more lives over there about other topics and answer a lot more of your questions than I can here with 1,800 people online. While I'm on the topic, folks, would you please go hit that thumbs up button? If it's anywhere on your screen right now, just take your little mouse pointer and take your finger and click on that like button, please. We got 1,800 people online and only 450 likes. So either you just really don't like what I've got to say, or you just haven't thought about it, which is more likely. So it does help. Do me a favor, go hit that like button. There we go, we're over 500. Let's see if we can get over 600. That really is helpful, and so do the comments. So I really like the comments. If you got questions, please ask them in all caps. It makes it a lot easier for me to read, especially right now since I don't have my glasses on me. Gaza stops killing and sees Jesus. Thank you for giving the thumbs up. It really does help the video get shared. Do you believe that the Jews are still God's chosen people? So you're asking for my opinion. That's the kind of thing that I would probably talk about more likely on my own podcast. So go over to the Hot Zone and ask me that question over there, and we can talk about what my opinion is about spiritual matters like that. When is America leaving Syria? Apparently they are planning to, one tired mama, but I have not heard that they have actually pulled out. I think maybe they might have quietly backtracked on that decision. They made the decision, the Biden administration decided we were going to pull out of Syria. I think maybe some smarter heads got to him and said that would be a really bad idea right now because ISIS is making a resurgence and ISIS is coming out of that area of Syria where we have troops, and so maybe it doesn't look real good for us to pull all of our troops out of Syria just because we've been getting hit with missiles from Hashishabi and Iranian-backed militias out there. Keep doing what you're doing, okay. Well, yeah, we'll love it. If we get to 1,000 likes, that'd be great. Yeah. Ultra-Orthodox draft still in the works. So they're still kind of arguing over the ultra-Orthodox draft. You know, at the beginning, there were some of those guys who volunteered, but now they've been, the politics are coming back into it, and they've been fighting over whether or not they need to draft. Not whether or not they need to. They do need to, and not because they don't have enough troops for the current conflict, but because they are going to need more troops if they end up going into Lebanon. If the IDF goes into Lebanon, I think it's likely that they will, but it may be another month or two before they do. They're going to need more troops. And they have enough that they could win, they could prosecute this war in the north if they needed to, but they don't have enough to rotate people in and out. And they're finding that, you know, if they're in this for the long haul, they need to be able to send people home on weekends, rotate them in and out, give them an opportunity to, you know, off gas a little bit, because otherwise, you know, they start having a lot of psychological issues. And we know that from our time in Afghanistan and Iraq. You know, the suicide rate goes up, post-traumatic stress rate goes up. Do you know that the majority of people who claim post-traumatic stress from in the United States military from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq never actually saw like real combat? What I mean is, like, you know, see your buddies getting killed next to you, firing shots in anger, all that sort of thing. They may have gone to the war zone, stayed on the base for the majority of their tour, maybe heard some incoming rockets or something like that. But the majority of the people who claim post-traumatic stress never actually saw major combat. But they're claiming post-traumatic stress for a different reason, because they were taken away from their families. They were sent over to this very harsh environment, and they got used to a different way of life where all your decisions are made for you. It's actually in some ways easier to be in the combat zone. So, trust me, I've been there a lot. In some ways it's easier. And so when you come back to the real world and you got to deal with bills, and you got to deal with relationships, and you got to deal with all the complexities and minutia of daily life, it gets so frustrating that you just want to kill something. And so that's one of the reasons, I think, why people feel like they've got post-traumatic stress, when it's actually more like culture shock. It's less post-traumatic stress and more culture shock. Does the IDF have chaplains? Not chaplains like we do in the United States, but they do have rabbis that go out there. So I guess you could say yes. Okay, this person needs to go away. Free Palestine, Gaza. Okay, question. The Temple Institute said essentially that they could possibly sacrifice the heifers in Shiloh. How likely is this going to happen? I don't know. You know, it's very curious to people here in Israel that the majority of people who are spun up about this red heifer issue are American Christians. People over here are not that worried about it. I'm not saying that you're worried about it. I'm just saying that they're not thinking a lot about it. They're like, yeah, there's these guys that are into the whole red heifer thing. But, man, American Christians are spun up about this red heifer thing. And I've talked about it on a couple of previous podcasts. I looked into it some. There's a sect of Judaism who has been preparing for the sacrifice of the red heifers. There are people who believe that they're going to do it here in the next day or two, the next couple days, maybe this weekend. I was up on the Temple Mount today. There's no giant altar built up there. I was, I'm not saying it's not serious. I'm just saying that the people who believe it's serious are in the United States, not over here. So I'm not sure what that tells you. I don't think this means that the world's going to end in the next 3 days. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. Any update on the hostages? No, nothing more on the hostages. There was a video that came out, this is a while back, that showed one of the hostages' dead bodies. This is one of the reasons why they're trying to figure out how many of them are probably dead. And they believe that only about 99 alive of the 130 or so remaining hostages. That's all we know right now. Okay, so I'm gonna call it, because I'm gonna go eat supper with my wonderful wife, and I will be going live on my own channel a little bit later on tonight, maybe in a couple hours. So go over to the Hot Zone and hit that notification bell, and you'll get notified when I'm about to go live on my channel. So please like and share this podcast. Please go to cbn.com if you'd like to donate and try to keep us on the air. We appreciate all the donations we get. Trust me about that. And you can go, again, chuckholton.com and subscribe over there and get notified for all the stuff I'm doing. What if the states incorporated what Louisiana passed? Okay, so again, we'll talk about things like that over on my podcast tonight. So come over to the Hot Zone. When I go live over there, we can do an Ask Me Anything. You can ask whatever you want, and I'll answer all your questions as best I can, okay? So let's pray for Israel and pray for the IDF right now. Lord, I just want to come to you right now and specifically pray for the soldiers of the IDF. I want to pray that you would protect them, send your angels to camp around them. I pray that they would have wisdom. They'd be able to raise the forces that they need to finish this fight. And I pray that they would be able to absolutely demolish what's left of Hamas, so that Hamas cannot be a threat to them anymore. But I pray that they would be able to do it in a way, Lord, that would not give the other forces that are arrayed against them time to improve their defenses or their offenses. I pray that the residents of the West Bank, the Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem, would come to their senses and would learn about reconciliation, would start to believe in the message of Christ dying on the cross, that we can be reconciled to God. And we were his enemy, but we can be reconciled to him. I pray that you would send dreams and visions among the Muslims in this land, and that they would see Christ and would want the forgiveness that he brings. And I thank you for Easter upcoming. I pray for all the people who are watching, Lord, whatever battles they're fighting right now, whatever challenges they've got, I pray, Lord, that you would just reach into their lives and make yourself very real, very powerful to them. They would just feel a supernatural presence with them right now. In Jesus' name, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, thank you very much, and God bless you all. Again, I'll be live over on my channel, The Hot Zone, here pretty quick. So stay tuned. We'll see you later.